Hey everybody, Steve here, Safe Farms, and today I just wanted to let you know that while in the past I've been talking a lot about bug out bags, well today's the day that we're finally starting the series on the bug out bag. So anyway, let's take a look and see what we're going to cover in this series. Now we're going to go over a lot of information about the bug out bag, but we're also going to discuss a lot of other things, like what I call the 72-hour survival myth. We'll also talk about different types of bobs, military, civilian, armed, unarmed, and what's best for you and your family. We'll talk about building your bob and tailoring it for success for you and your location. We'll go over proper packing rules of what goes where, survival needs versus comfort items, carrying the load, is it too much, too little, and if it is, it could be too late. We'll also talk about hiding in plain sight versus direct and open confrontation. And then in the end, somewhere in this series, we'll go through and we'll build 3 different types of bobs. So that way you can get an idea of what you need to do to help you and your family in an emergency situation. Now before we get into all that other information, there's one thing that we have to do first, and that's define what a bug out bag is. Now here's what I've come up with, and I think it covers all the bases. A bug out bag. It's a system of bag or bags containing water, food, equipment, documentation, or other items used during emergency situations, whether they're man-made or natural, in order to survive and or evacuate from one location to another for a specified period of time. Now that pretty much covers it, and if we forget one of those things within that definition, we could be setting ourselves up for failure. So that's what we're going to keep in mind as we go through this series of the bug out bag and you. Now another important piece of information that we need to go over is what I call the 72-hour survival myth. Now the facts show that most emergency situations requiring the real use of your bob are probably going to be longer than 72 hours. We just have to look at the news, things like Haiti, Katrina, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, tsunamis, ice storms, power outages, military coups, quarantines, hostile takeovers, you name it. Hey, it probably lasts more than 72 hours. So what I want people is to not fall under the false security that emergencies will only last 72 hours. You need to be prepared and have an appropriate backup plan, or one that takes you past that 72 hours in case the emergency goes longer than that. Now there's different types of bobs, but I figured if we categorize them, we can start to narrow in and tailoring our bob to our success. Now with my experience in the military and law enforcement and being a civilian, these are the 2 categories I came up with. The first one being military, and is to primarily enable a person to perform combat operations and survive on the modern day battlefield. Now if we compare this to the civilian category, which is to enable a person to survive during an emergency situation, whether it's natural or man-made. Now I guess you could go into different subcategories of being armed, unarmed, heavy, light, cold weather, hot weather, desert, or different types of environments, but I think you get the idea. What we want to do is tailor our bob to where you're at in your location and the possible emergency situations that could come up. Now the one thing we don't want to do is just throw a bunch of stuff in a bag and think, hey, we're good. There are 3 things or areas that we need to look at to help build our bob and tailor it for success. Now that first category is needs, because there's definite things that we need in order to survive. That would be things like water, food, shelter, protection, anything that deals with your mental, physical, or spiritual well-being, things that you need to survive. Now there's another thing that comes into play, another category, and that's location. Location is very important because if I build a bug out bag for where I live, it might not be applicable to where you live in your location. Because there's different weather, there's different starting points, distances, ending points, possible obstacles, whether you live in a big city, a small town, a wet, rainy type of region, or a desert type of area. Again, the location is very important, and you have to keep that in mind when you're starting to plan to build your bob. Now the third category is the situation. Because there's going to be different situations that we'll face. It can vary from place to place. So basically what you want to do is you want to look at your needs and what you need to survive for you and your family based on your location, where you're going to go, or if you're going to bug in and stay where you're at, and the type of situation that may arise. Could be a natural disaster, a hurricane, an earthquake, an ice storm, drought, famine, something of that nature. Or it could be man-made, where it's a military coup or a quarantine, or maybe it's even just a chemical spill there in your neighborhood. Again, all these things we need to look at to tailor our bob for success. Now, before we get into packing our bob, what we want to look at is a few things. The first thing being our physical ability to carry a load. Now, if I can have a bob like this that's packed to the gills and weighs a ton, but I can't get from point A to point B to survive, it's not going to do me any good. On the other side of the coin, if I got a light bob and it doesn't have the things I need to survive, I'm out of luck there as well. So there's a lot of things to consider. The weight of our bob, the distance that we're going to travel, our performance and whether we can carry the load or not. And all those things added together will bring about fatigue. Now, fatigue impairs our mental and our physical capabilities, and that will have some say on whether we survive or not. So in order to survive, you're going to need three things. Basically, you're going to have a plan for you and your bob. You're going to have to stay calm and think logically, and then you're going to have to execute your plan. In other words, you need to work your plan. Because what's going to happen if you get to the point of where you make a plan, you make a bob, but you don't execute it the way that you've practiced, that's going to have a severe effect on whether you survive an emergency situation or not. Now we're going to discuss some packing tips. First of all, the heavier items always go on the bottom. Now we want those heavy items down low so the weight is on our hips and not on our back. Now the reason we do that is to one, that will reduce lower back pain. It'll also help guard against injuries as we're going from point A to point B, and it'll help fight fatigue, and we know that that impairs our mental and physical capabilities. The other one is the most used items you need to have easy access. Now that could be anything from food to water to rain gear, headgear, maps, compass, socks, something like that. Again, the things that you're going to need in a hurry, you need to have easy access. You don't want to be digging through your bag to the very bottom to get that map out so you can get from point A to point B. The other tip is to pack for your situation. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. It doesn't help if you see a bag on YouTube or a list off the internet, you pack it and it's not geared for your abilities or your situation or your location. Now the other tip is to pack the same way every time. Now the reason we do this is that if you pack the same way every time, you're going to know where your first aid gear is. You're going to know where your water's at. You're going to know where your map, your compass, your ammunition, and the other items that you need. Because it might not be daylight when you need those items. So you need to know your bob inside and out to be able to get to those items in a hurry, whether it's daytime or nighttime. And the way to do that is to pack the same way every time. Now what we're going to talk about is survival needs versus comfort items versus the things that you probably just need to leave at home. Now the things that we need are water, food, shelter, maybe a lighter, something to start a fire, canteen cup, a flint, nutritious food, guns, ammunition, things to protect you during that emergency situation so you can survive. And then there's comfort items that give us hope that will do a great deal towards enabling us to survive as we're bugging out. That could be something from a simple video game to an iPod, an MP3 player. It could be a Bible. It could be anything like that. And we have to realize that while those things might add some weight to our bob, it's really important to have hope to carry us on to get to where we need to go. Now, basically what we're looking at is to build on the basics and then add other items. But there's definitely stuff that we don't need. The kitchen sink, the espresso coffee maker, the Prada shoes, things of that nature. It's not going to help you during a survival situation, so you don't even need to worry about it.